I want to talk about the power of giving, and I want to link it to what my main research on, which is well-being, which we tend to call people's experience of their quality of life, or more commonly we would call this happiness. Actually, are our lives going well? And all of us have experienced happiness in our lives. We experience it hopefully relatively often. We don't always feel happy. But we can be sure that if everybody experiences happiness, then it sort of somehow serves a purpose for us. It's not going to be accidental that human beings feel happy, just as it's not accidental that we can feel angry or frightened. And even something like smiling, which you can see Pete doing here, is actually helping us build relationships. So happiness, it's sort of important to recognize that we can see happiness. It's very, very visual on our faces, and that's not accidental, because it is a bonding emotion. In fact, lots of psychologists will call happiness a social emotion. It's almost not individual, it is between us. In fact, if you walk down a street laughing to yourself, you look quite mad. Whereas if you're doing it with somebody else, it's the most natural thing in the world. So happiness helps us build relationships with other people. I think it's just about okay in late November to start talking about Santa Claus. But we always think of Santa Claus as smiling, as happy, as jolly, and he is, of course, almost the patron saint of giving. And we think about the happy children who are going to receive the presents. But he is always happy, because he is giving. And we have psychological experiments that actually start to prove this. So my favorite piece of research in this was some experimenters. They took some students. A lot of psychological research is on students, too much actually. But they took some students and they gathered them together and they gave them envelopes. And in the envelopes they had different amounts of money. But then they were also told, half of them were told to go out and do retail therapy. To go out and spend that money on themselves, come back at the end of the day and say what they bought. The other half were asked to go and spend that money on somebody else, to give it away or to do something for somebody else with that money. Which group do you think were happier at the end of the day? This group. Quite a lot happier, actually. And not only were they happier at the end of the day, when they measured them at the end of the week, and 2 weeks later, this group were statistically significantly much happier than this group. So it's sort of kind of proof that retail therapy doesn't work. And if you genuinely want to be happier with how you spend your money, it's not to say you should never spend money on yourself, but you should certainly think about a portion of that as giving other people good experiences. We did a bit of research for the Government Office of Science on what were 5 ways to well-being. And the reason I've got the fruit and vegetable there is deliberate. Because we all know, and it was one of the big things that happened in between sort of 1995 and 2010, there was this idea that 5 fruit and vegetables a day is healthy for us. There's actually nothing magical about the number 5 and 5 fruit and vegetables a day. When you've had 2, you've got about 60% of the benefits, and the benefits right up to about 8. So you're not going to do yourself any harm by having 6, 7, 8. And if you've got your first 2, you've got most of the, quite a lot of the win. It was a very big program, and we just did a tiny bit of work on it. But we did one that caught the public imagination, and it was to identify these 5 things. And the first one of the 5 ways, and these are all evidence-based positive things that you can do for your happiness. And this applies to all of us across all ages, and they were designed to be universal. And the first one is to connect with people, is to remember that our relationships are the cornerstones of our lives. And in fact, humans are relational beings. In fact, we could all say that we are actually made through a relationship from our parents. And we are brought up in a network of relationships, our families, our schools, and our communities. And relationships are absolutely the key driver of positive experiences and happiness in life. The second one is to be active. which is that actual physical activity is great for our happiness as well. It's not actually about 3 or 4 sweaty pieces of exercise each week. It's much more about getting off the sofa and walking. The next one is to take notice. A lot of evidence around mindfulness. You might have heard a lot about mindfulness, that actually reflecting on experiences, noticing what's going on around you, being engaged in the world is very good for your happiness. It helps reflective process, helps you get a sense of meaning, what's going on. It helps you do other things like connect with people by noticing things, or catching sight of beauty. Aesthetics are important to us, so taking notice. The fourth one is to keep learning, and learning throughout the life course. So keep there is very important. Lots and lots of evidence that, one of my favorite named papers in psychology is called "You Can Teach an Old Dog New Tricks." And there is still elasticity in the brain right through into the 80s, and older people can keep learning new things. And then the fifth is our friend give. And all of the evidence is here that give is important for our happiness and well-being, and I've told you some. And it's important to also recognize that these words, connect, be active, take notice, keep learning, and give, are just positive ways of reinforcing things that have been known in our spiritual and our religious traditions, and in our poetry, and in our great literature for years. These are not new things. So just to sort of finish off, really, it's just thinking about giving in Essex. And the purpose of tonight is a fantastic organisation here, the Essex Community Foundation, and sort of reminding ourselves of the that not only in the power of giving that it makes you feel better, but your giving is benefiting all these other people who are themselves receiving and giving in return. So people who are learning to who are lonely people or whatever, and they're coming together, they're cooking together, learning new skills, connecting, making friends, noticing what's going on. Presumably they give each other things as well, and all of these sort of projects really come alive. So thank you very much for asking me, and I hope I've convinced you that there's a lot of power in giving.